Spoiler! Spoiler!
What on earth is that bird? What? What is it saying?
Subscribe!
Attack on Titan's final season was one of my most anticipated anime of all time. After all, good old AoT was the first anime I watched a full season of, so the fact that it was ending, well, that got me all riled up and ready to go. Of course, now we know that there's still a final season to look forward to, but either way, there's still plenty of content to discuss with these 16 episodes. However, this season had some controversy surrounding it. I had never seen another part of Attack on Titan with this much discussion around it before it even released, at least insofar as people questioning how the quality of it would turn out. And this was spurred on by a change in studio from Studio Wit to MAPPA. Up until now, Wit had done a real good job, regardless of some of the qualms I've had here and there. In a lot of ways, this was a top-class adaptation. So this shift in creators got me and a lot of other people sweating profusely in the late hours of the night, wondering what would happen to our precious Eren. So did it turn out that badly? Were our worries realized? Well, maybe. But before we get to the actual content of the season, I'd like to talk a little bit about some behind-the-scenes shenanigans. See, Attack on Titan has generally looked fantastic, but there were some problems rising to the surface. Mainly, the show was a challenge to animate, and that challenge resulted in some ridiculous working conditions. I'm talking about spending every waking moment drawing, until you eventually collapse at your desk and repeat the cycle the next day. So after 3 seasons and many years, Wit's animators had enough of working on it. As such, someone else would be finishing up this adaptation. Anyway, yeah, being an animator in the anime industry usually sucks, but you probably know that. However, this show and its proposed deadlines were so unreasonable, so mind-numbingly terrible, that even in an industry where overwork and employee abuse is the norm, loads of studios simply said, no, not interested, when asked if they would take on Attack on Titan. Of course, eventually MAPPA agreed to do it though, and here we are. So why am I bringing this up now? Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have some things to say about Attack on Titan's visuals in this so-called final season, so it feels right to be clear about this from the outset. Regardless of what I'm saying here, the actual people working on the show put a ton of work into it. All too often, I see people throwing around words like lazy when describing this season, or really just animators in the anime industry in general, and it grinds my gears because no matter what you think of this season's animation, these people are not lazy, and it is nuts to even imply that they are. Anyway, with that out of the way, it's time to get into Season 4 itself. The story of this season of Attack on Titan represents a massive shift in focus. We've jumped forward 4 years, and beyond that, we're no longer following Eren and the gang. Instead, there are a bunch of new characters, along with the King of Suffering himself, Reiner. This worked out very well for the anime because see how everyone looks now, the general art style and coloring, the backgrounds and character designs? It's pretty different from previous seasons, a lot more like the manga. And while I think the creators did a good job of translating the manga's designs into anime form here, and that the new look of the show works well, it would normally throw me for a bit of a loop. Like I'd see my old pals and go, wait, this isn't right. This isn't Mikasa, Eren, Armin, Historia, and Jean. However, because of this time skip and change in focus, I had a chance to settle into this new art style before even seeing the characters and settings I was more familiar with. On top of that, since the people have aged a bunch, it's kinda expected that they'd look different. It also helped that in this arc, we're meant to get a whole new look at the world of Attack on Titan by seeing it through a fresh set of eyes. So this change in art style kinda serves to reflect that. Now, does this mean that I love everything about these changes? No. All these things I mentioned help the change feel more natural, but I still can't help but wish that the show looked a bit more like it used to. I miss the bright, colorful aesthetic, the incredibly detailed background art with an exceptional sense of depth, the bold lines around the characters. That's all stuff I loved about the show's presentation before, and yeah, I appreciate how it looks now too. It certainly doesn't look bad, but I've still got my preferences. But the different art style isn't the only thing that benefits from the story's change in direction. The music has also changed a bit. A lot of the time it has less of that grit and electronic flair that made the previous Attack on Titan music so recognizable. Instead, there's more of a focus on regular acoustic instruments. Normally, I probably would have been a bit taken aback by this change, but here it serves to make this new world feel even more different from Paradise. It helps that the music is also used very intelligently and deliberately too. For example, when these kids are working at the party, the militant snare drum helps us get in their heads, reminds us how every one of their actions is driven by this desire to perform well as warriors. Then there's the use of some diegetic music during Tiber's whole stage performance, which lends an air of gravitas that the manga simply didn't quite have for me. Later, cannons fire on beat to the music, which is just, yes, I love that type of thing. It makes the whole show feel so cohesive. I could go on, but yeah, it's clear that a whole lot of consideration and care went into writing the music and choosing where each piece was placed. Really, to me, this feels like a sign of competent direction overall, and that competence shows itself in other elements of the show too. Now, a lot of the time, Season 4 does lean on the manga as a storyboard, but I didn't have a problem with that for the vast majority of the time. But wait, Lowart, I hear you cry. You said you didn't like when Season 2 used the manga as a storyboard. And why yes, dear straw man of a viewer, you would be correct. But I personally think that Season 4 does a better job of this. Mainly, the adapted panels either already have good framing for the show's aspect ratio, or the shots have been adjusted and tweaked so they'll fit in well. They also tend to remove elements of the manga that I don't think lend themselves to the anime's presentation, and this is the biggest way this section differs from Season 2. For example, the action lines during more down-to-earth scenes have either been removed entirely or are almost never there. Sure, this isn't the most creative or ambitious adaptation, but it worked well and rarely stood out to me in a negative or distracting way. Then there's the voice acting, which is top-notch as always. There were multiple moments where these masterful performances made the characters feel far more real than they did in the manga, where I got a far better grip on who they are, what they're going through, and how they feel. In terms of presentation, the first standout episode for me is episode 62, which is Reiner's whole extended flashback. I love the gradually increasing pace of the episode. It feels like Reiner is looking back on his past and slowly losing grip on when things happened, or how they happened, or how he should feel about them. Meanwhile, episode 63 did a great job of putting added emphasis on the hero Helos by making him more of a visual focal point of Willie and Megadeth's conversation. Then there's episode 74, which did an amazing job of showing how Zeke became the man he is, and this is another case where the voice acting really elevated the manga's material for me. However, this season doesn't only match the look of the manga, its story is exceptionally manga accurate too. But still, I did my due diligence and went through and made notes of any cuts or alterations I noticed, and well, there isn't much, at least not much worth mentioning. Most of it really boils down to shortened conversations, where characters elaborating on their plans and motivations has been trimmed. Really, the only main specific things that stood out to me is that the anime cuts out some references to the Ackerman clan being the results of LD's experiments with the subjects of Ymir. There are only a couple added things too. First, right at the beginning, there's some additional dialogue where characters explain what's going on to Falco. Some of this stuff felt a bit awkward in the manga, but it's even worse here. The one line in the anime that really gets my gizzard is when Falco says, "Wasn't I flying around with a sword just now?" What does that mean? Is it meant to be a meta reference to 3D maneuver gear? I don't know. Weird. Fortunately, the other additions to the story are far better. There's this brief scene where the warrior candidates are being congratulated by other Eldians for their work and successes on the battlefield, which reinforces their warrior mentality in a different way. We have this part where Willie says bye to the kids, knowing that he'll probably never see them again. It might be small, but it made Willie feel far more fleshed out and helped me understand his sacrifice. And yeah, that's it. That's really all that I cared about as far as changes and alterations went. I guess they also add an Udo playing with this paper bag, and wait, did that little just litter? No wonder he got trampled! There is one big continuity error that pops up in this season though. Mikasa's tattoo, which she covered up in the manga. However, the anime previously removed the scene where she gets this tattoo and didn't properly cover up her arm. Of course, the folks at MAPPA had no control over what happened previously in the anime, but either way, now, it's a weird anime-exclusive retcon that I'm sure perplexed many anime-onlys, or at least left them going, that's kinda stupid. Overall though, despite my qualms here and there, this is all sounding pretty great. I mean, sure, there are some things I'm not all that fond of, but it looks like my previous worries were mostly unfounded. Everything turned out fine. Oh, wait, what's that? CGI killed anime. That's how the story goes. And yeah, I have a certain fondness for 2D animation, but to say that 3D stuff can't look good? Nah, that's crazy talk. Even so, the idea of Titan battles being CGI made me cry CGY. In the end though, the CGI was fine. First things first though, Mappa's CGI Titans look far better than Wit's. Sure, Wit didn't use CGI that much, but when it did pop up, ugh. So yeah, it's a good thing that Mappa improved the CGI designs. In fact, there are plenty of times that these Titans look nice, particularly the Jaw Titan and the Cart Titan. They nailed a lot about this quadruped movement, and to me, the highlights of the CGI animation stem from the Jaw Titan's impressive heft and sense of speed as he pulls off these incredible feats of strength. However, the other Titan's movement is of more variable quality. In particular, they tend to move stiffly, more like animatronics than beings of flesh, blood, and bone. Their facial expressions don't communicate as much. Really, they look a lot like replicas of their original glory. I think this is the worst for the Beast Titan, but that's probably because I had such a deep love for how he was animated before. His weight, sense of presence, the way he pulled back to play baseball, all of it had me going bananas. To be fair, some Titan close-ups and transformations are done using 2D animation, and they look great, so that's nice. However, even if the CGI isn't terrible, it's a massive step down from what came before. And this isn't something where I went back and combed through footage, breaking it down frame by frame so I could complain. I noticed plenty of disappointing moments on my first watch through, and it only got worse with subsequent viewing. Of course, then there are the rare moments where CGI was used for regular old humans, and it looked so out of place and served as a reminder that this show was rushed. Then beyond that, there are all these issues that have nothing to do with the CGI, but rather the general presentation of the show. I skimmed over them earlier, but yeah, there are a lot of flat facial expressions and all these little nagging moments that are just kinda janky. Sure, most of the show looks fine enough, but this stuff pops up enough that sometimes I'd finish up an episode and be left thinking, wow, that was pretty rough. Plus, we have to remember that for so long, Attack on Titan has been so far above simply fine enough. There were so many jaw-dropping moments, times where I'd finish an episode and go, wow, that was such a joy, that was amazing. And that simply wasn't the case for me here. In my opinion, Season 3 Part 2 had the most consistently great adaptation out of any section of Attack on Titan. There were very few cuts, the music choices were great, the voice acting was phenomenal. This all holds true with Season 4, but the part where it falters is the presentation, the way everything looks and moves. It's easy to call each individual moment of this a nitpick or simply not that big of a deal, but added together, well, they serve as a reminder of what could have been, if only the incredibly talented staff working on this show had been given more time. Regardless of all that though, I thoroughly enjoyed what we got, and I look forward to what the true final season has in store for us. But I think it's still okay to be a little bit disappointed with the direction things took here. Anyway, I do plan to cover the final season of Attack on Titan, so if you want to see that, I'd recommend subscribing and hitting the bell and all that stuff that you're supposed to do now. Thanks for watching either way though, and thank you to all my patrons whose wonderful names are scrolling on by right now. You're the best. I really appreciate you, and yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye for now.